Because of my experience as a student and feeling like I had a lot of incredible mentors, like my boss when I worked for the
Yeah.
Upper Bound program, Arnie Smith Alexander, it took it out of the realm of just me being a college student in activist groups. But then in my work, I was working with high school students from the Grand Rapids area and having mentors who were really smart and really savvy and really cared about the students, really loved the students. I had to change my way of thinking about being a staff person running a program for high school students, that I started to look at education and high school students. They were coming to Grand Valley, spending their free time for 6 weeks, like studying and doing social things with us in the dorms. And I remember Arnie saying at one point, I don't understand anyone who thinks they can educate without loving their students.
Mm.
And I don't see any students developing respect for any educators or administrators who cannot very clearly demonstrate that they love them. I remember that so well because I was so wrapped up when I first started into behavior modification. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like you're one thing after another. People like pinching each other, people calling each other names or whatever. And I was doing all of that. And I got into this sort of authoritarian role idea that Heath Alexander pulled me aside. I remember one time and said, Tony, you got to come at kids differently. You got to come at students differently. If you want them to have any respect for you, you can't come at them like this authoritarian, like, this is the rules. I've been charged to enforce the rules. And here's the, like,
Mhm.
you got to find your own voice and way to be authentic that actually can give a chance for them earning respect for you. So that was, I would say, the beginning of some of my early thoughts on solidarity with students. But then I would say when I finished grad school at Syracuse and then got my dream job to work for the Mexico Solidarity Network to run semester long programs in Mexico, working with social movements in Mexico. And the students that were coming on the programs were attracted specifically to social justice and activism. So then I'm like 30 and I'm responsible for a semester program with 20-year-olds, early 20-year-olds in Mexico with some of the most powerful social movements I had ever, experienced. And wow, I would say I learned popular education through practice in the sense of like the students taught me how to be different. I thought I had to really because I felt young to be running a program like that. I felt because of my identity, I'm not Mexican, that students were judging me. And so I felt like I had to hold this arbitrary sort of, no, but I have credentials to be here. And they're the reason I'm here. And so those first semesters were so instructive with me of like mini battles with students of them saying stuff that I was unwilling to show vulnerability,
Mm.
that I learned how to be a vulnerable educator through them, not because I read it, not because someone told me just do this. It was because I was trying to be an educator and I was at least gradually more and more open to being more vulnerable with them and admitting things I don't know and leaning on them to see, well, what do you think about this? And what can I learn from you? And that just transformed the rest of my time working with students in Mexico, was that like I approached the semesters differently and it was incredibly beneficial to the program, to my relationship with the students. I still have really long standing relationships with a number of the students in Mexico they have completely changed from a student teacher relationship. I go to them for advice about my career, about my personal relationships. And that's only possible if you tap into this source of a solidarity based approach, that it is not a knower and an unknower. It's
Mm. Okay.
what kind of meaning can we make from things that we have? And I value what you do know, and I value what I don't know that you can teach me, as well as the things that I may be able to offer. So that was, I would say, the kind of the beginning of. And then when I transferred from that role and we moved to Kalamazoo and I worked with Kalamazoo college students specifically, not students from all over the place. It was a smaller community. It was students that I would meet first year and then come into their junior year when they were going to study abroad. And then they would go abroad and then come back. It was a very radically different relationship with students. But the thing that sort of what developed into the presentation that I've made with a couple of former students, as well as a colleague in the international education field, it came out of a conference where folks in the conference, I forget the session that it was in, but I remember everything about it. But they were doing this thing that I don't know what to call it other than like jam piling on students. If I'm around a pretty big group of men, I'm always like a little bit like, oh, shoot. If you get enough men together, I don't want them to say things that I will address and I will confront. And then everybody will be like, the
Hey, here we
party
go
pooper or whatever.
again. Here we go.
Here we go. It's that locker room thing. But again, in the professional sense, because I've had such deep relationships with students for so long, I am very uncomfortable with conversations about students that feel like jam piling and that are not constructive and that they're just like common enemy bonding, where it's we all know students like
Over some
generalization.
grievance. Yeah.
And if like a student's legitimately struggling or like missing things or not turning in things in time, you can talk about that and it matters a lot about the tone. And that's where my communication theory background comes in. And I'm like, the way you speak about that student going through that thing impacts the way our office will work with students, impacts the way. So I had this mission because this conference, they were all jam piling and I raised my hand and it was not well thought out. And I just said, I don't know a single person in this profession who loves reading their emails and is just, oh, I can't wait to get emails. Like you're all complaining about it. Why are you talking about students as if they uniquely terrible at email? And we're all just like, we're so amazing. We love email. So I said it in a
You
bit of a
aired it out.
snarky
You
tone.
aired it out.
I
Yeah.
aired it out. It was a little bit obvious that was a change in the mood. I killed the mood of everybody being like laughing. And so then I had about a year of reflecting on that and saying, I don't know, I don't want that to be the takeaway from, I have an obligation to say something and I don't want what I'm saying to be, you're all jerks jam piling on students. That's not the way I want to go about this. So I had to go back into like, where are they coming from? Why are they saying this? And what could I offer to say, hey, like, how can I invite people in instead of calling them out and say, hey, there's another way. And let me show you another way. And I had no idea how this might go over, but I started constructing it with some students and with Daniel Diaz about like, how do we conceptualize this as an attractive way to invite people in to do something that could benefit their lives? Like it's a benefit to them. It's better to the students, benefit to their programs. And so that's where this concept of solidarity as praxis came through is that the thing about praxis that I love is that combination between you do need some theory, you need some conceptual ideas to make sense of it, but they are worthless if you don't try to put them into practice. And it's worthless if you don't allow the practice of it to inform the theory that you read or you write.
Mm,
That praxis sort of fusion is so important because so much of the things I believe about teaching have come through the practice of trying things and being like, that didn't do what I hoped it do. I want to rethink that. So the presentation I'm hoping to do again is really focused on that of saying like to our field, hey, here's another alternative. I know that these things are difficult. I know that we wear a lot of hats. I know that we get really frustrated. I know that we're underpaid. I know that we like all of that being said, I think we can do it differently. And I think our field needs to do it differently if we are facing what we are facing, which is declining enrollment in universities across the board,
across the
except for
nation.
the
Yeah.
most and study abroad, like the post pandemic issues with study abroad are that folks are more afraid. And I'm noticing a sort of, this is not a research based, but I'm noticing a trend back to the traditional Europe study abroad. Europe is where we study abroad in students and their families. That's like a way they feel safe, even though
Okay.
a number of countries in Europe handled the pandemic terribly, like we did. So it's like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to help our field offer a different way of going about it that could potentially help everyone. It's gotten good feedback, but I still am tweaking. I'm still trying to learn from each time I've done it to say, well, it seems like folks are still worried about this. I got to figure out how to address that.